So this was recently posted. Let's zoom in so people can see, obviously, along there as well. And this is a Scarizard, who has been a recent WoW developer and has put some fantastic posts together. This one talking about item level weapons from Raid and such. So I'm just going to read it whole and we'll see how we feel it. Gold Plastic Syndrome up the wazoo. Yeah, exactly, Toku. So... Hey there, this feedback's come up in a few places, so I wanted to drop by and give an update on what we're doing to address it, why we're addressing it in this case specifically, and then go into a deeper dive behind some of the motivations and current thoughts about end boss weapons, raid loot in general, and weapon tokens a la Castle Nathria. First off, the what and why. We're going to be adding an agility dagger to Rigellon, boss 10, and removing the agility fist weapon from Skolex and moving it to the jailer, boss 11. This represents +1 additional weapon overall for the raid and leaves only some healers without a weapon from those final 3 bosses. We're not likely to make a change to that, as there's a unique healer mace that we anticipate will be a pretty powerful option for those specs earlier in the raid. As to why we're making this change, Sepulchre of the First Ones has the highest amount of bosses with increased item levels, 3 bosses over the traditional 1 or 2, which we felt was appropriate to support both Rigellon and Lords of Dread feeling like high level encounters you could tackle in any order, as well as the cement a clear jump after Anduin, the raid's first weak hurdle. However, even after one extra boss at the +7 threshold created a level of imbalance that felt less textured in the some have one, some don't way, and more like a small few being excluded. Exclusion to this degree wasn't intentional, and that's why we're acting on it. However, this has led to some legitimate questions. Why don't all classes have a stronger weapon in each raid? And furthermore, why not use weapon tokens like Castle Nathria did? These may not answer all of those perfectly, but I'd like to share some thoughts on the subject and shed light on the kinds of things we think about when designing items and loot tables that may help push the conversation forward. Now that right there immediately is incredible. The fact that they are approaching this and they are saying, this is what we have done in the past, this is what we're doing now, and this is why we're doing it. This is the communication we have all wanted from Blizzard for the longest time. Just give us more of this communication, and Scarizard is doing a perfect job with that. I cannot talk enough good about what they are doing. Legitimately cannot talk enough good about what they are doing. And if they continue to do this leading up to 9.2, in 9.2 and then 10.0 as well, I'm honestly thinking that Warcraft is in a very, very special place right now. Philosophically speaking, we think there's a lot more to items than just the stats they provide on a mechanical level. We put so much time into naming and placing them appropriately because they're a way to flesh out the stories of the enemies and environments they come from. As you suggest in your post, we certainly could have included an axe over a Warglaive on the Lords of Dread fight if our goal was purely covering every spec. But let's look at it from a different angle. Lords of Dread has you fighting Mal'Ganis, debatably the most well-known demon in all of Warcraft lore, and the only demon in any of Shadowlands 3 raids. From that perspective, it might be weirder if we didn't drop Demon Hunter specific weapons from that fight. Every loot table on any boss should help tell a story, which adds to the excitement of receiving the drops themselves. There's layers to this, of course. Harder or more iconic encounters often deserve a more unique or powerful rewards, but they're a tool we use for our game to feel more immersive. Another example from Sepulchre is Artificer Zymox's return. There are a pair of swords that use the same model, where one is a relic the cartel stolen from the raid, and the other is a replica of the same blade they've made with the intent to auction it off at Tazavesh. Compare this to 9.0's tokens. While there was a higher level of equality among drops in the raid, the excitement was often lower in a relative sense. This is in part due to the delayed gratification tokens provide. You had to zone out in 9.0's case to get the appearances from your Sanctum. And in part due to the disconnect in what you actually got out of them. Despite having some very cool Covenant appearances, they didn't feel grounded in the story of the raid or the content you got the token from, which leads to the specific drops feeling less memorable overall. Again, completely agree. The token system was cool, it did offer, It did offer a lot of equality across the raid. You almost had someone that could take a weapon, but at the same time, you do end up in that really horrible situation where you don't have... It drops and you go, okay, now I've got to leave the raid and come back in, and everybody's got the same weapon type. Transmog does go some way to stop that, but the excitement of a weapon actually dropping is something that I think was sorely missed in Legion, as good as the artifact weapon system eventually became. Having these tokens is nice, but at the same time, I think if it was tokens in every single raid, it would very, very quickly get out of hand and get very dull. And as mentioned there, they do feel less memorable. I can't remember the weapons from Castle Nathria. I can't remember the weapons from Castle Nathria at all. However, Jaethys the Prison Blade from Sanctum of Domination, I absolutely remember that weapon, and I think that's the key point of this. Another goal of ours is to have loot evenly distributed throughout a raid such that there is a variety of... Oh, sorry, I've just skipped one there. Every loot table on any boss should help tell a story, which adds to the excitement of receiving the drops themselves. No, I've already read that one as well. Where am I? No, there we go. I'm there. Another goal of ours is to have loot evenly distributed throughout a raid such that there is a variety of things groups value differently across bosses and even entire wings. This helps groups who are struggling to progress on a specific difficulty still get useful loot while re-clearing, while also serving as a nice incentive for groups to push ever so slightly into a higher difficulty and gain a foothold. This idea is what led us back to making certain unique weapons. Internally we call these can't rips. In Sanctum of Domination, like Jotungur from the 9 or Cruciform Vein Ripper from Painsmith. Their unique effects were on par with a higher item level bump, but we were also able to let them drop earlier and enhance the experience of defeating those important characters within our setting. Weapons aren't the only way we can create memorable and equitable raid loot. Jewelry and trinkets also tend to help fill in those gaps as well. But they're a very potent tool in our toolbox for making all parts of the raid feel rewarding and meaningful to visit, rather than making the final bosses be the only ones that matter. That's a very, very good point there. We do obviously see the rings that drop from Anduin in this raid. They are almost filling in that little gap of killing the important lore character or defeating the important lore character in the sake of Anduin. I would have liked to have seen that done with Old Warrior's Soul. I feel as though Old Warrior's Soul should have been a warrior-only trinket. That would have definitely given a little bit more of a feeling of warriors being tied to Saurfang. He is the warrior that people think about when you think about the class. So I would have liked to have seen that, but the fact that they do identify this and they say, well, if these unique effects are on par with a higher item level bump, we can let them drop earlier, so it kind of gives players a little bit of a bump there. I like what they're doing with that, and I like the fact that they are discussing this as well. To be clear, 9.0's weapon tokens did solve a problem for some players, and there's a lesson to be had in the response to them. While a 7 item level disparity is rarely ever a barrier to class viability, the feeling that everyone was on an even playing field along at least one axis is clearly an idea that resonated strongly among some of you. I don't want all of the above speak to sound like we're never going to iterate on weapons, or that people who liked how 9.0 played out were flat wrong. Just that tokens clearly solve only one slice of the problem while denying us, or at least hindering, the ability to achieve our further goals for raid itemization as a whole. There's a lot more we could get into about the place of cantrip weapons / items, but I'd like to save that discussion for a future post later on when we've got a greater appreciation for how the Sepulchre plays out. I hope this helps communicate a bit more about where we're coming from and why things end up the way they do, even among players who value the mechanical and number side of WoW, for whom some of this may not be satisfying. Lastly, I want to thank you for taking the time to write this post and make suggestions. We can't respond to every single one, but they help shape our discussions and iterations internally. Again, incredible feedback, and yeah, it's the comm we want from every game company. The fact that they say, look, we can't respond to everything, but know that we are reading these. And I also appreciate the fact that, you know, Skarzad has taken the time to say, you may not be happy with the answer, and we may not be able to give you all of the information that you want, but this is the information we currently have. And again, saving a discussion for a future post later on when we've got a greater appreciation for how the Sepulchre plays out. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Once again, turning around and saying, this is something we want to come back to. I love this. I absolutely love this from Skarzad, and once again, this is something we've all been screaming for, is getting this information from Blizzard and getting this discussion going on, and at least explaining why things are going, and turning around and saying, yeah, this idea was good, but it's only part of the problem. We're still fixing it. We're still working on it. It's brilliant. And again, if this continues on for 9.2 and 10.0, Warcraft's in probably one of the best positions it's ever been in.